Hello there, this is City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today I have a layout that I made using the My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit for December. I'm also going to be using one of the My Creative Scrapbook December cut files. It's called Merry Christmas, and I'll be showing you that in a little while. I started off this layout using an EK Success scalloped punch, and I punched out a number of papers from the kit. And here you could see the cut file, and I've backed it with some of the papers that are from this month's kit. There were papers from 49 and Market and also some papers from Blue Fern Studios, and they went together really well. I decided to use the Blue Fern Studios papers to back the cut file, and I'm using a combination of the 49 and Market and the Blue Fern Studios papers for the scallops. I'm going to place the scallops on the lower part of the layout. I am mounting all of these strips of scallops on a separate piece of paper, and I'm staggering them a little bit so that the bumps won't exactly line up. I hope that makes sense. I'm putting down some ATG adhesive, and then I'm layering the scallops on top. I drew some horizontal lines. I'm not necessarily placing the strips of paper on the lines. They're just a visual guide for me to make sure that I'm not putting those strips on crooked. And I inked the edges of all of the scallop strips with some Distress Oxide in Mowed Lawn. I guess I just wanted to add a little bit of extra to some of the strips. The red and white striped strip that I'm adding down right now, that wasn't a pattern paper from the kit. That was some of the packaging that was from one of the embellishments that was included in this month's kit. And I liked that. I thought that would be a good way to make a border between the pattern paper in the background and the scallop strips because it was so bold. I mount everything on a piece of paper from my stash that I know that I wouldn't use for another purpose, and I'm conserving that piece of pattern paper that was from the bottom because that would have just been wasted if I covered it up. So I saved that for another layout. And now I'm layering the scallop strips on the bottom, and I'm adding a little bit of that Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide to all of the edges. In addition to backing the cut file, I also did some stitching. I did the stitching on the words that say Merry Christmas, and I also did some stitching around the stars at the top. I also added some chain stitching to the tree that's on the right, and I end up taking that off later, and I'll talk about that a little later on in the video. These are my two photos. These are of both my daughters on Christmas Eve last year. I mounted both of the photos on some white cardstock, and then I punched out some photo corners using the pattern paper in the kit. I used an EK Success photo corner punch. That's the scalloped punch. That's a very handy punch that I use quite a bit. I attached the photo corners down to the two photos, and then I also attach the cut file down, and for that I use my ATG adhesive. Now, I'm going to add some flowers to the layout, so I'm going to add some sparkle to them. First, I use an old paintbrush and I put a little bit of heavy duty gel medium, that's matte medium, on the edges of the petals, and then a little tiny bit on the center of the flower. And then I dip them in diamond dust. And then when that dries, they are very, very sparkly, and I really like adding that touch, especially with Christmas layouts. So I coated all the flowers, and then I'm going to let those dry. And then I was thinking that I should do the same thing to the leaves, because if the flowers are sparkly, it would make a lot of sense to have sparkly leaves too. So I did the same thing. I put a little bit of the adhesive on the edges, dipped them in the diamond dust, and then I allowed them all to dry. Probably because of the stitching on the back of the stars, they weren't staying down really well. So since I had out that heavy duty matte gel medium, I decided to use that to help those stars and then some other spots on the cut file stay adhered to the pattern paper. And you could see that I had placed a punch on top of the stars for a little while, and the gel medium is a great adhesive, and once it's dry, it holds things extremely well. I had these stars in my stash. I don't even know if they were a scrapbooking item. I think I got them in a dollar store, but I thought that those would look really nice on the tops of the trees. They were the right size and the colors matched in with the collection. Now I'm using some strips of gold pearls and I'm going to be adding some of them to each of the trees, and I vary the way that I use them. On the tree on the right, I put the strips on every other line. On the tree all the way to the left that I'm working on now, I put the pearls all around the outline of the tree. And on the tree in the middle, I follow those lines on the left-hand side of the tree. And these pearls are from my stash. I get these from the Brad and Eyelet Outlet, and I really like the way this particular color went along with the kit. And this is where I decided that I didn't really like that chain stitch. I liked the chain stitch, but I just didn't like the way it looked on this layout, on this tree, and I only did it in that one spot. So I decided to just get rid of that stitching and to add some strips of these jewels. These jewels are also from my stash. I got them quite a while ago at a dollar store, and I usually cut them into individual little pieces and I put them around on my layouts, but I thought that leaving them in strips was perfect for these Christmas trees. So I didn't include all the footage, but you could see that I used both the jewels and the pearls, and I outlined all the trees. And often I add pearls to the photo corners, and I thought that I would add some of those same jewels that I used on the Christmas trees to these photo corners. So I'm putting two at an angle on each of the photo corners on the layout. Now that the gel medium on the flowers and the leaves has dried, they're ready to be placed on the layout, and I think you could see there just how sparkly they are. I made 3 clusters of flowers. Well, one of them is just one flower, but I have them in 3 different areas on the layout. And one of the great things about these layered flowers is if a flower is too big, you can often peel off the back layers and you're just left with the smaller layers that were on top. And that's what I did with 2 of these flowers. They were just a little bit too big for this layout. But I always save the layers that I peel off because you can always combine them with other flowers or put something in the center and use them as a flower on their own. Now I'm attaching down the leaves that I added the diamond dust to. And I don't use all the leaves, I use most of them, but I don't end up using all of the ones that I put the diamond dust on. I wanted to add some pine branches to the layout, and I'm sorry this is white on white, but usually I use Distress Oxide and I will color the pine branches. In this case, I decided to keep them white, but I wanted to make them a little sparkly, so I'm adding some Bow Bunny glitter paste. In the color is called Sugar, but it's just a transparent paste with lots of glitter in it. Oh, and it also adds lots of shine too. So it's a very glittery, shiny layout. I chose a number of tabs and sentiments from the ephemera pack, and right now I am inking the edges. Again, I'm using the Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide. The 49 in Market ephemera pack that was in this kit, it had tons of tabs and sentiments, and I thought that a tab would look nice on the photo on the right in that corner, so I added a tab and then I added a sentiment that said good cheer. I layered a banner across the 3 Christmas trees. It says the joy of December. And to add a little bit more detail to the scallops on the bottom of the page, I added 3 more sentiments. They say hello December, magical moments, and naughty or nice. And I added some fun foam behind the banner that says the joy of December, and also those 3 sentiments on the bottom of the page, just to give them a little bit more emphasis. Now I'm adding a few more jewels from my stash. These are Paper Studio brand, and I'm adding only the smallest of the jewels to the Christmas trees. And I really like the way those iridescent jewels make the Christmas trees even more sparkly. The layout is very busy, but I just had to add something to the top of the layout. I just felt that it looked incomplete without something up there. I didn't want to add too much, so I'm just adding a strip of this red and white paper, and I'm using my scissors and I distress the edge. And I'm also going to use some of the Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide and ink the edge of it as well. And then I wanted to make sure that I had the paper aligned correctly, so I turned the paper sideways. That just helped me to see the top of the paper so I knew where to put the strip of paper. And then I went in with my fingers and I did some extra distressing. And I always like the way that looks. I feel that it makes it look a little bit more rustic. And now I'm taking all of those pine branches that I added the glitter paste to, and I'm going to add those to all of those flower clusters that I have. I'm happy that I chose white pine branches. I think that they really brighten up those floral clusters. And I also like the size. The leaves are rather big. They're not too big for the flowers, but they are on a larger scale for the layout. And I think that the smaller pine branches add a little bit of detail to each of those floral clusters. Often I will cut out whatever die cuts I want to use specifically for a particular layout, but I had already cut these out for another layout and I didn't end up using all of them. So I don't have a lot of them, but I think that I have just the right amount of them, and I'm cutting them in different lengths. Some of them I'm leaving a little bit longer and others I'm cutting down very short, and I think that that adds a little bit of interest to the layout as well. I use some gel glue and I attach all those pine branches down. Now I'm pulling things from my desk to use to mask off the areas of the layout I don't want any white splatters to get on. I want to add some white splatters to just the pattern paper that's in the background, and I wanted there to be a little bit of authentic splattering, but I also didn't want to get paint all over the layout. So I'm using a combination of splattering and then just dotting the paint onto the layout using the straw that's inside this container of paint. And I not only put the splatters on the top, but any place that I see that pattern paper peeking through, I add a couple of dots of paint. And I always love adding white splatters to my layouts. I do it all the time. I especially like to do it though for Christmas layouts and winter layouts because it looks a little bit like snow. And I thought that I was going to complete this layout without adding any paint to the page, but I'm really glad that I added those little white dots. I think that they were a touch that added a little wintry effect to this Christmas layout. Although I was recently reminded that for a huge portion of the world, Christmas takes place in the summer. But in any case, that completes this layout. Here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it. I hope that you got some ideas on how you could use your My Creative Scrapbook kit, or at least a little bit of inspiration. Please take a look in the description box. You'll find a link to the My Creative Scrapbook website, and you could check out all of the beautiful kits that they have available for December. I hope that everybody has a fantastic day. I will see all of you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.